After his grand summer offensive fell flat, Russia's President Vladimir Putin is about to enter his winter nightmare. Through a series of precise, calculated strikes, Ukraine has obliterated Russia's last hope of maintaining its war effort and its most important resource, fuel. Shortages are being reported far and wide across the nation, prices are rising, and some stations have even imposed strict limits on how much gas each customer can buy at a time. The Russian population is increasingly feeling the effects of the war in their everyday lives. It's an unsustainable situation, and one that even Putin will struggle to talk his way out of. Reports on the scale of these shortages and strikes differ depending on the source, but the overall trend is clear. And it's all thanks to Ukraine's remarkable long-term strategy, which has consisted of identifying the most important high-value targets both in occupied territories and within Russia itself, and taking them out with expert precision. While Russia was busy bombing hospitals and sending record-setting swarms of drones towards Kyiv and other towns and cities across Ukraine, Ukrainian forces followed a completely different tactic. They weren't interested in killing Russian civilians or blowing up residential buildings. They wanted to hit the Kremlin where it hurt the most, taking out the pieces of infrastructure that were most vital to keeping the country's war machine up and running. And what does any machine need to run? Fuel. So, time and time again, reports have surfaced of Ukrainian drones or missiles hitting Russian oil refineries, as well as fuel storage facilities, pipelines and depots. In the last couple of months alone, explosions have rung out at numerous locations all over Russia, including some that are literally hundreds of miles beyond the borders of Ukraine. Places like Volgograd, Saratov, Ryazan and Krasnodar have all felt the force and fury of Ukraine's drones raining down upon them, setting millions of tons of oil ablaze in an instant and dramatically depleting the Kremlin's fuel supplies. And even though Russians are forbidden from sharing images or footage of drone strikes online, videos have still started to spread across Telegram channels and other social media networks, showing fires, explosions and thick clouds of smoke filling the skies above these refineries. The effects weren't felt straight away, as Russia is, after all, one of the world's biggest oil producers. At peak capacity, this country can make over 11 million barrels of oil in a single day, so one damaged refinery here and there isn't enough to have any sort of immediate impact. Indeed, Russia, and its leader, Vladimir Putin, has long relied on its gigantic fuel industry to exert power and influence around the world. The industry has also, in more ways than one, paid for the war in Ukraine. Even when Western nations imposed sanctions on Russia and slashed their investments in Russian energy, the Kremlin simply started selling more of its oil and other resources to other nations like India and China, relying on these Asian investors to prop up its economy and allow it to keep spending exorbitant amounts on the war. But as time went by and Ukraine struck more and more of these important fuel-related targets, cracks began to show in the once impenetrable Russian oil industry. Back in July, for example, Russia imposed a gasoline exports ban for oil producers. At the time, officials stated that this was simply because of high levels of demand associated with summer travel and grain harvesting, but many analysts believe there was a direct link with the increasingly frequent Ukrainian attacks on oil refineries. Soon after, reports of delays and disruptions began to emerge. There were stories of lines several miles long, made up of motorists queuing up to fill their vehicles with gasoline. Meanwhile, Russia-appointed leaders of occupied Ukrainian territories began to openly admit to fuel shortages. Yevgeny Belitsky, for example, the Russia-backed governor of Zaporizhia, reported that high levels of demand, combined with oil refinery repair works and the threat of further Ukrainian strikes, was causing disruption. In the Zaporizhia region, the fuel shortage is further complicated by logistic issues and the threat of enemy attacks on fuel trains. The Kremlin's leader in Crimea too, Sergei Aksyonov, acknowledged the issues. "This is an objective situation which could last up to a month or more," he said, going on to admit that the problem would likely persist for as long as the war continued. The very fact that officials have been speaking out about this issue is a big deal, since Russian officials generally tend to say whatever the Kremlin wants them to say and often avoid openly admitting when things are going wrong. This was pointed out by the American non-profit research group and advocacy think tank, the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, which wrote in its Russian Offensive Campaign Assessment for September 11. Russian state media is acknowledging the growing gasoline shortages in Russia, but is downplaying the role that Ukraine's deep strike campaign is playing in generating these shortages. The Russian Independent Fuel Union, an association of gas station owners, stated in an interview with Russian state newspaper Izvestia on September 10 that over 10 Russian federal subjects are experiencing fuel shortages, including Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, Saratov and Rostov Oblasts, far eastern regions and occupied Crimea, and that fuel shortages are also reaching central regions such as Nizhny Novgorod Oblast. Russian State Duma Anti-Monopoly Committee Expert Council member Dmitry Tortev told Izvestia that local fuel shortages are becoming widespread in Russia. Russia Independent Fuel Union representatives stated that many gas stations have not received refinery deliveries for several weeks, forcing some gas stations to shut down. While Russian officials have generally preferred to blame fuel problems on things like tourism and the farming sector, the truth of the matter is clear to see. Ukraine's drone and missile strikes have absolutely played a huge part in causing these shortages, as the ISW notes. ISW continues to assess that Ukraine's strike campaign against Ukrainian energy infrastructure is impacting Russia's domestic gasoline market, exacerbating shortages and causing price spikes that will likely push inflation upwards and create further macroeconomic instability in Russia. It's noteworthy that Russian state media is more openly discussing gasoline shortages, as it suggests that the issue is beginning to permeate into more mainstream Russian society. This is not the kind of crisis that's going to go away or get better overnight. In fact, it's getting worse at a rapid rate, and people all over Russia are feeling the effects day in and day out. The shortages are spreading to additional regions, fuel stations are being forced to close, and certain fuel types are becoming almost impossible to find. As noted by open source intelligence analyst Visioner on X, Russia is facing a severe fuel crisis after Ukrainian UAV strikes on refineries. Gasoline shortages have already spread to more than 20 regions. While the shortage was previously recorded in the Far East and Crimea, in September it spread to 10 more regions: Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, Saratov, Samara, Ulyanovsk, Penza, Rostov and Astrakhan regions, as well as Kalmykia and Tatarstan. Some refineries have not supplied 92 and 95 octane gasoline for several weeks, and some are completely closed or operating irregularly. Reports also emerged in mid-September of some Russians being forced to turn to black market suppliers and pay astonishing prices of up to $9 a gallon to get the gas they need, with some opting to stock up before the rates went even higher. It's worth noting that in Russia, the median salary is just $1,200 a month, and many people live on far less than that. For many, the black market rates are far too high, but even the official gas station prices are also becoming increasingly out of reach for average people. On September 10, according to Russia's own official statistics, average fuel prices were around 64.01 rubles per litre, as reported by journalist and documentary filmmaker Tim White. Even Russia's official statistics, which are massaged to acceptable levels, begin to show fuel problems. The current average pump price is 64.01 rubles per litre, up to 2.6% in a month, equates to over 30% if continued throughout the year. The real price is likely 66 rubles per litre. That worked out around $2.66 per gallon. Now, as shown in images shared by the X account Jay in Kyiv, that figure has almost doubled in certain regions. The Kremlin's fuel crisis is now becoming unmanageable, as the few stations that still have gasoline are now charging the equivalent price of $4.52 per gallon. It now costs half the median monthly salary to fill a tank. And that's not all. In more cities and more regions, the problems are spilling over, and gas station managers clearly have no idea how to cope or what to do, with many resorting to bizarre strategies in a bid to try and contain the crisis. Some have imposed strict limits on how much fuel each person can buy, as reported by open source intelligence analyst Special Kherson Cat. The fuel crisis is rapidly spreading to more and more cities and regions across Russia. Every day, one can find not just one, not a few, but dozens of reports that the fuel crisis is spreading or worsening. At many gas stations where fuel is still available, gasoline is being dispensed in quantities of either no more than 10 to 20 litres per vehicle or only for specialised vehicles. This is the clearest indication that the attacks on Russia's fuel infrastructure are working and should continue and intensify. Other gas station chains, meanwhile, have tried alternative tactics. The HTK chain, for example, decided to stop selling 92 gas to regular customers, making it available to loyal fuel card owners only. Fuel shortages in Russia keep deepening. In Caucasia, the entire network of HTK gas stations has stopped selling AI-92 to regular customers, only allowing purchases with fuel cards. In Crimea, about half the stations are closed. The huge Lukoil chain, meanwhile, decided to go in the opposite direction, announcing the cancellation of fuel cards in one region and banning customers from buying filling-up cans with gasoline. In short, it's absolute chaos in many Russian regions, as well as occupied territories like Crimea, where one local activist revealed, "In parts of Crimea, the situation is critical. Many stations have closed completely. At the ones still open, there's no gasoline, only diesel and natural gas. With the planting season beginning, this threatens to derail it. Local authorities have introduced a ration system. Only government vehicles are allowed to refuel." Meanwhile, in the Nizhny Novgorod region, home to one of Russia's largest cities, school buses have been unable to pick up children due to the lack of gasoline at local stations, even though regional authorities continue to boldly claim there are no major issues. Even in the far east of Russia, as far from the conflict in Ukraine as possible, the effects are being felt. A regional governor, Alexei Maslov, recently had to respond to concerns among the population, promising them that more fuel was on the way. "We see and understand your concerns about queues at gas stations and difficulties with refueling. There is no physical shortage of fuel in the Vanino district, and queues at gas stations are caused by repair work at refineries and rush demand. In the coming days, new batches of gasoline will arrive, which will meet the needs of the population until October 12. Maslov also urged people to stop panic buying, as this would only make the problem worse. The purchase of fuel by motorists for future use, this has created an artificial shortage. When some gas stations run out of gasoline faster, the new batches are delivered and kilometers of queues form at others. The most important thing we can do now altogether is to stop panic buying." Unfortunately, many people are unlikely to heed Maslov's call. With the situation becoming increasingly desperate and many Russians fearful that the shortages will only worsen in the weeks to come, panic buying is likely to continue. The more that happens, the worse the crisis will become, and black market sellers will become even bolder, pushing their prices higher to take advantage of people's desperation. For so long, a large percentage of the Russian population hadn't really felt the effect of their country's war with Ukraine. For many, it was just some sort of distant conflict, a so-called special military operation that should be all taken care of quite quickly and wouldn't impact their own lives in any notable way. But as the war has gone on, month by month, year by year, it has slowly but surely come closer to home, with everyday Russians feeling the impact bit by bit. Obviously, they don't feel it anywhere near as much as Ukrainians, who have seen their homes blown to bits and their towns and cities reduced to rubble. But Russian people are at last starting to see the truth and experience the consequences of the Kremlin's aggression. And everything they're experiencing is negative. Their lives have not improved in any way because of the invasion of Ukraine. They've only become worse, and it's not just because of the gas crisis. Prices of food and other everyday essentials have also skyrocketed across the country in recent times. The Russian people feel increasingly isolated and cut off from the rest of the world, and the government is controlling almost every aspect of their lives, restricting everything from their freedom of speech to the websites they're able to access on their phones and computers. That's not to mention the ever-increasing number of Russian families that have also been forced to mourn the loss of their loved ones in this needless war, with so many husbands, brothers, fathers and sons sent off to Ukraine, never to return. Russian media and government officials have done everything in their power to gloss over these issues, hide the harsh realities of the war, and paint a false picture of the conflict, telling the population that everything is going well. But they can't hide it any longer, and even staunch Russian nationalists and hardened military bloggers are starting to see behind the curtain. As revealed by military history author Chris_O on X, many of these bloggers are starting to complain. They no longer believe the Kremlin's official accounts or its bold statements about shooting down every single Ukrainian drone that enters Russian airspace. Many are breaking the rules, sharing images and videos of Ukrainian drones online and asking questions about how these attacks are being allowed to happen again and again with such regularity and efficacy. One blog, entitled 2 Majors, has called for the creation of a single unified agency to counter Ukrainian drones and urged those in charge to provide the necessary equipment and assistance to bring them down, stating, Currently, no one is held accountable and adequate measures will not be developed. We urge our esteemed capitalists to consider the need for somewhat more assistance to the Russian army, at least in terms of equipping the mobile fire teams guarding the skies around the oil refineries. Some bloggers have come up with their own conspiracy theories about how and why these attacks are occurring. Some say that gas industry officials are literally allowing their refineries to be blown up as some sort of bizarre scheme to push fuel prices higher. Others, meanwhile, have suggested a more realistic theory, arguing that Russia is quite simply running low on the surface-to-air missiles needed to bring Ukrainian drones down. And without adequate defenses in place, it just isn't possible to stop these attacks. For Ukraine, meanwhile, this is all about the end result of a long and hard-fought campaign that has demanded an extraordinary amount of hard work, intelligence, patience, and precision. Analysts suggest that drone and missile strikes have effectively taken out a quarter of Russia's entire oil refining capacities, as revealed by Igor Susko on X. Russian news confirmed 25% of oil refining capacity is offline from Ukrainian strikes. 27,000 tons of surplus crude oil daily with nowhere to go. 50% of gas stations in occupied Crimea out of business. 14.2% of gas stations shuttered in the southern federal district. What's more, despite having a strong energy industry, Russia lacks storage capacity for its excess crude oil. This issue has been compounded yet again by Ukrainian forces, who have repeatedly targeted oil tanks and other storage locations, leaving Russia with fewer and fewer places to put oil while it carries out repairs at its refineries, pipelines, and other important locations. That in turn means that crude oil production has to be reduced even further, because there's simply nowhere for the oil to go. On top of all of this, Ukraine has also started hitting natural gas facilities, adding further pressure on Russia's energy sector. On September 25, the Ukrainian commander-in-chief, Oleksandr Syrsky, summed up the situation. The capabilities of the enemy's military-industrial complex have been significantly reduced. We can see this on the battlefield. This is a fuel crisis in Russia. And it's a crisis that's only going to get worse, because Ukraine isn't slowing down or easing up on its attacks. Its drone units, like the birds of Magyar, will continue to find any remaining Russian refineries in range and hit them as hard as they can. Each strike will diminish not just Russia's oil production capabilities, but also any hope it had left of winning this war. Because without fuel, even the mightiest armies are incapable of claiming land or conquering enemy territory. Without fuel, the Russian economy will continue to spiral. And without fuel, people all over the country will see their lives get worse. And when they look for someone to blame, their eyes will inevitably turn to their supposedly great leader, Vladimir Putin himself. Now, learn more about Putin's ever-growing list of worries and fears in our recent video, looking at how Russia's colossal losses in Ukraine and rising levels of domestic instability are piling pressure on the Russian president. Or check out our breakdown of the current situation in Pokrovsk, one of the most important strategic locations along the front lines of Donetsk, where Russian soldiers are dropping like flies. And finally, be sure to subscribe to our channel too for more updates, insights, and detailed breakdowns of the Russia-Ukraine war and other important conflicts around the world.